Okay, so as promised, this is a continuation of a video that I just did a few days ago about Samba, Active Directory, and how you can connect the RSAT Toolkit to the Samba4 Active Directory domain. And before I did that, I wanted to actually have a Windows 10 VM set up and sort of go over the configuration of that Windows 10 VM, the pfSense firewall that I'm using as a DHCP server, and the Samba Active Directory controller and its IP address. So as you see here, this is sort of just a quick breakdown of the IP address, the IP addresses that are assigned. So my pfSense server that is on this this virtual LAN is 192.168.1.1. The Windows 10 VM is just getting an IP address via DHCP. It just so happens to get 1.100 here, as you see right here. And the Samba Active Directory domain controller, which is also connected to this virtual LAN, is running on 192.168.1.60. And so you can see here in Virtualbox, here's my Ubuntu Samba Active Directory controller here. So that's up and running. All of the services that are required are up and running, so we'll go ahead and just minimize that. Here's the console of the pfSense virtual machine as well. This is the firewall. It's acting as a DHCP server, DNS, and how the virtual machines are going to access the outside world. And everything is running here, so we'll go ahead and minimize that. And so here's the actual Windows 10 VM. So everything inside of here is running as inside the Windows 10 VM. And all I've done here is an ipconfig in the command line, so you can see kind of what's going on here. Here's the 192.168.1.100 that I already showed you. The gateway is the pfSense firewall. The DHCP server was the pfSense firewall. The DNS servers, there's only one, and I've actually had the pfSense DHCP server assign 1.60 as the preferred DNS server, and 1.60, as you see over here, is not pfSense itself. It's actually the Samba Active Directory domain controller. So why that is, and I'll demonstrate this in just a second, why that is we want anything in the ad.testcompany.com domain to go to the Samba Active Directory controller. If we don't use the AD controller as a DNS server, or if the computer doesn't know about it, then if we do a test like this, ad.testcompany.com, if we do a test like this and we don't have 1.60 as a DNS server, then this computer won't know what ad.testcompany.com is. So we can try it now and it'll work. Yay, we get a reply from 1.60 as we would expect. We could also ping samba.ad.testcompany.com and we get 1.60 like we're supposed to. Now let's do a test here, and let's say that we had not set the DNS server to the Active Directory controller and it was just using pfSense. Let's go here. Actually, I think I've got this pulled up, maybe right here, yeah. So let's just see what would happen if we were to use pfSense as the DNS provider. Okay, so we're using 192.168.1.1 as the DNS server. So we're bypassing the Active Directory controller altogether. So now if we do another test of ping ad.testcompany.com, we're going to get something totally not legit. We're getting a response from, or we're getting a resolution to this IP address just because testcompany.com actually is something. out there in the outside world, but that's not what we want. So if we ping, let's try Samba. Yeah, it's actually kind of funny to see what we get. Again, totally has nothing to do with our world here, our own little virtual land. So had that domain that I chose not been something that was real out there in the outside world, we would be getting nothing. So as you can see, this is incorrect. This is wrong because pfSense is basically taking the request and forwarding it to Google or whatever the ISP's DNS servers are. So we want Samba.ad.testcompany.com to actually resolve to 192.168.1.60. And so again, the method that I chose was just assigning via DHCP the DNS server of the Samba Active Directory domain controller. And how I did that is I went into the pfSense interface, and I went to the DHCP server on the LAN interface, and there's an option here to specify DNS servers. Okay, so if you leave this blank, it's basically just going to hand out whatever the interface IP address is, and it's going to use its own DNS forwarder and do the lookups on its own. But if you specify an IP address here, when I connect a client, and let's go back here, and we'll turn this back to obtain DNS server address automatically. Okay, close. We'll close this, and we'll do ipconfig/all again, and now it's back to 192.168.1.60. So you can do a couple different things to get that DNS server where it's supposed to be. You can either specify it manually, which I don't really recommend if you have a lot of machines that you need to administer. You can do it DHCP if that's what you want to do, or what you can do without even specifying a DNS server here is you can, let's see, where's the, I believe it's a domain override, and that might be in the DNS forwarder. Oh, we're using the DNS resolver. So what we want to do is a domain override. And what that would do is anything that we specify here, so ad.testcompany.com, would actually be forwarded to 192.168.1.60, and we could say the description is the AD domain. Okay, so if we save that, apply changes, then we can actually go back to the DHCP server after this applies. Okay, so we'll go back to the DHCP server and we'll remove this, save. We'll have to apply that again or not. All right, so we should see this revert back to 1.1. May have to release. And then renew. And then IP config all. Okay, so now it's back to 1.1. But now, even with the DNS server being 192.168.1.1, which is pfSense, we have told pfSense, hey, anything that is within the ad.testcompany.com domain, forward that over to the Active Directory controller and let that handle the resolution. So, whoop, let's try that again. ping ad.testcompany.com. And you can see we're getting the correct IP address. And we can ping Samba.ad.testcompany.com, and we're getting the correct IP address. So there's multiple ways to do that. It just depends on what direction you want to go. Again, you can manually specify the DNS server, which for just a few machines is okay. If you're using pfSense, you can use a domain override. You can specify the IP address of the DHCP or the DNS server that you want to use. Whichever way you want to do it is totally fine. So now that we have the DNS server set up and we can ping the ad.testcompany.com domain and it's being resolved correctly, we are now ready to download the RSAT Toolkit for Windows 10. So just go to Google, type in Windows 10 RSAT Toolkit download, and click whatever link that Microsoft provides at the time, and then click, it's going to look something like this. Okay, so just kind of scroll down and click download, and then they have Windows 10 1709, 1803, and then Windows Server 2016. I'm actually running Windows 10 1809, and they didn't really have a download for that, but I just used 1803 and it worked okay. Okay, so you just check the box, click next, click download, and then run the install. And the download looks like this, and you can just run it and it'll actually install all of the tools that you'll need to administer the Active Directory domain. Okay, so that's like the Active Directory users and groups, the group policy, the DNS manager, everything that you'll need. All right, so we can go ahead and close that. Now, what you'll notice is if I try to open the Active Directory users and computer app, it says to manage users and groups on this computer, use local users and groups. And to manage users and groups in a domain, you have to log on to the computer with an account that has domain administrator rights. Okay, so basically, since we just set up the domain and we just set up the Active Directory controller, we don't really have any users other than the administrator user. So what I have to do is log in to Windows 10 as administrator of the test company Active Directory domain. Okay, so how I do that, and so basically this is just the local, actually no, it's not even the local users and groups, it's just not connecting to anything. So we can close that out, and basically what we have to do is we have to join this Windows 10 virtual machine to the ad.testcompany.com domain. All right, so let's see, join. Okay, so we're going to do access, work, or school. We'll do connect. And actually, yeah. Okay, so we don't want to put an email address in here, and we don't want to join an Azure Active Directory organization. We want to join to a local Active Directory domain. All right, so you click on that. The domain name is ad.testcompany.com. Next. And then, let's see, enter your domain account info. Well, the only account we really have right now is the administrator account, so we're going to go ahead and use that. And I hope that I remember that password correctly. I did. Okay, so the user account is administrator. The account type is standard user. You can set this up if you want. It's basically wanting to know the account that you're setting up on the profile that's going to be tied to as far as this Windows 10 VM. Do you want this person to be a standard user, or do you want them to be an administrator of this computer? I usually just skip this because I'm not actually ever going to sign into the computer and use it on a regular basis as this user. So I just skip this. And I think we can go ahead and restart now. Let's go ahead and do that. And hopefully this doesn't take too long, given the fact that we've got several VMs running, and I'm also recording video and screen here, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to take too long. So we'll notice that the login screen is probably going to look a little bit different than it did before, now that it is joining a Active Directory domain. Oh man, I hope we don't have problems with that again. All right, it looks like it's working. I had some issues with Virtualbox and 3D acceleration. Anyway, okay, so here is the test user that is a local profile on this Windows 10 virtual machine. So I can sign in to that account with the password that I know if I want to go ahead and do that. But if I sign into that account, that is not an administrator account of the Active Directory domain. And remember, I want to run that Active Directory users and groups tool and all of the other RSAT Toolkit. I want to run that as an administrator of the AD domain. And this local test profile is definitely not an administrator of that domain. So if I do other user, you can see sign into AD. That lets us know that we're going to sign into the Active Directory domain. And then you can just use administrator. We're actually going to do AD/administrator. And then the password that we set up on the Samba Active Directory controller, we're going to use the administrator account and that password that we set up before. Okay, so remember the one that I had to keep redoing because it wasn't complex enough. So we're signing in as administrator, and since it's the first time we're signing into this computer, it's building the local profile for this Windows 10 VM. So it's going to take a few extra minutes than it normally will, or that it normally would. But once it signs in, it's basically going to be signed in to this Windows 10 VM as ad.testcompany.com as the administrator account of that domain, and I'll be able to run those tools. So here we go. It's building my profile, setting everything up. It always says this might take several minutes, but sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. So you can see here we still have everything running here. And so this Ubuntu server with Samba4 running on it is actually the Active Directory controller that we just used to bind this Windows 10 VM to. Okay, so now that we're signed in, we can, well, let's give it an extra second to load. I don't want to rush things. It's still doing some things. All right, let's click start. And you'll notice that if you hover over the thumbnail here for the user, it says administrator. Okay, whereas before I was signed in as a user called test, and that was an administrator of this Windows 10 VM, but it wasn't an administrator of the AD domain. All right, so now we should be able to run the Active Directory users and computers tool, and it's going to automatically detect that I'm signed into the profile as administrator. And you can see right here, let's go ahead and full screen that. that this server that we're logged into is samba.ad.testcompany.com. All right, so that's my Ubuntu server over here, and we're actually accessing it from the legitimate Microsoft RSAT Toolkit. All right, so how cool is that? And then here is everything pretty much like you would see in a Server 2008 install. All the built-in accounts and everything, and you can see we only have one computer, but so here's Win10 VM. That's the computer that we just joined, so we only have one computer joined to it right now. But then here's all the built-in users or the security groups, and you can see we only have one domain controller right now, Samba, and I don't think anything's going to be there. No. Okay, so as you can see, that's working. So what we can do is come in here and we could say new user, and we'll call this Active Directory, and the user login name will say Active Directory user at ad.testcompany.com. And right now we don't have any other SPNs defined, but we could get into that a little bit later, possibly. Next, password. A user must change password at next logon. Let's do that. And we'll do next. Finish. Okay, and so now we've got an Active Directory name, or a user called Active Directory. That's not confusing at all. I didn't really think that one through. Anyway, the account username is Active Directory user, and that user must change the password at next logon. And you can do a lot of other cool things in here as well. You could say the password never expires. You could say that the account is disabled. Basically, the expiration of passwords is going to follow the just generic, basic default settings that are installed in Active Directory, which I think is 90 days by default. So anyway, as you can see though, all of these fields, all of this data is working. So if we wanted to add users or add this user to more groups that we'd created, we could do that right here, and everything just works. And it's I know a lot of people may go, you know, oh wow, big deal, but to me this is really impressive. I mean, again, I have not paid for Windows Server. I am not paying CALs for users to access Windows Server, but you know, here it is, pretty much the full-blown you know, options and features. So to me, it's impressive. Okay, so we've created that user, set the password, and we're forcing them to change their password at next login. All right, so let's go ahead and close this. And another fun tool is the DNS app. So we are going to say the following computer, samba.ad.testcompany.com. And actually, I believe you can just do ad.testcompany.com. All right. So here we go. This is going to pull all of the records that are running on this Ubuntu server. Whoop. And let's see, forward lookup zones. So we've got ad.testcompany.com, and we see that Samba and 192.168.1.60, there's the A record for that. So the cool thing is, as we, let's see, see if I can find it. Okay, conditional forwards, we're not going to deal with that right now. These records will automatically update as you start to add more controllers. It will handle itself when it comes to adding more computers to the domain. So it's really important to make sure that all of your DNS is set up correctly and is working. So all of the settings that we did on the Samba controller, the pointing to itself, to resolve host names and where it points to after that, and as you add more controllers, how those talk to each other and which they look at first and what the primary and secondary servers are, it becomes very important to make sure that you have a working DNS setup, because Active Directory relies on DNS so much. Okay, so if something is broken, you're going to know it fairly quickly, more than likely. So again, we're using the internal Samba DNS server. We're not using bind attached to Samba. So that is it, I believe, for DNS. We could go in and we could create some new records. So right click, and then there's all your options. You could create a new host record, aliases, MX, on and on and on. All right, so all that can be handled right from the Microsoft RSAT Toolkit, just like you had a real Windows server. Okay, let's see. Where's the group policy? Group policy management. All right, so we can expand this down. We see ad.testcompany.com. We see a processing error occurred collecting data using this base. Please change the base. Okay. I don't know what that was all about. Okay. So, I mean, to me, this is just crazy. This is crazy. Crazy awesome that you can build out the group policy objects again, just like you were running a true Windows server. Okay, so you can see we have just the basic things, you know, that come by default. But if you wanted to, you could dive in right now and start building your policies. So that is going to be obviously outside the scope of this video, but you know, because I don't want this thing to start running into another, you know, 2, 3, 4 hour video. But anyway, as you can see, the Samba Active Directory domain controller does work, and it does work well. And if you're familiar with Windows Server and all the RSAT Toolkit and building GPOs and all that stuff, you can, in my opinion, very easily move over to a Samba Active Directory domain, and you're not going to really need to learn that much, okay? Especially if you're not going to be responsible for the actual server administration, someone else is going to be handling that, then you will probably only ever see the RSAT Toolkit. You may not even know that you're not dealing with a true Windows server most of the time, okay? So I think that's pretty much it. As you can see, you know, this Windows 10 VM is joined to the Active Directory domain. I'll tell you what we can do. Let's sign out, and we'll sign in as that Active Directory user that we just created, and we'll test it and make sure. Okay, so we'll do other user, and we'll do Active Directory user. Okay. Okay. finally I got the password right. And it says the user's password must be changed before signing in. So you click OK. And it went ahead and automatically put in my old password here, and my new password is going to be something else I'll probably forget. Let me change it. Your password's been changed. And it says, hello, Mr. Active Directory. And so you can see like that all worked seamlessly with Windows 10 even, and even a very late build of Windows 10. So definitely an option, and in my opinion, a huge money saver. Like I said, a little bit more overhead in my opinion as far as the maintenance of the server in the back end of the Active Directory domain. But you know, if you're talking thousands and thousands of users and CALs and licenses and you know, you're talking a lot of money. You're talking a lot of money, and Samba can swing in, save the day, save a ton of money on licenses, and there are other things that it may actually do better than the Windows server does. You know, a lot of people, and I would agree, say that Linux servers tend to be a little bit more faster, more secure, more reliable. Okay, and with that, I would actually agree. So just imagine the possibilities if you had Samba Active Directory running on Linux, and you know, you didn't have to pay any licenses. You could save a lot of money. So I think that really is it. You know, we'll go ahead and sign this user out, but let's see. Yeah, we'll sign him out, and now I have a Windows 10 VM that is joined to my ad.testcompany.com Active Directory domain, and we can have all the fun that we want. Thanks.